Today, we're going to be talking about our Global Anti-Scam Alliance Intelligence Sharing Working Group. So I think Yuri has mentioned at the outset of the day yesterday, one of the things that GASA is doing to try to mobilize our network, mobilize our alliance towards solutions and action is to launch working groups on some of the most pressing concerns and challenges and issues of the day. Please make sure your headphones work. There's other ones over there if it's not working. And get everybody set up. Excellent. So what we're going to do today is essentially, it's an open meeting of the larger working group. But we encourage you to, if you're interested in this topic, if you're interested in engaging and participating, get in touch with us afterwards, join the larger working group, and then what you're going to hear about today is the goal of the working group is not just, hey, let's get together and talk about data sharing or intelligence sharing. I think we all have heard a lot about that. I think we get a lot of kind of surface level conversation about the importance of intelligence sharing and data sharing and signal sharing to the fight against scams that we're all engaged in and committed to. But rather the goal that what we want to achieve through this working group is to identify a few clear, specific projects that we will take forward in small groups under the auspices of the larger working group. So what we're going to do today is hear from three of the colleagues and leaders in this space who have already engaged with us to identify some proposed topics and projects that we want to explore, explain, unpack, and get some feedback on in terms of the viability of the project, the interest and relevance of the project, and then just ideas on how to frame it, how to move it forward. And the goal is to come away with something, a product in the end, that is tangible, usable, and applicable to actually getting something done. And so you'll hear from about three of those projects today. And the first one's going to be, I'm asking our friend Justen Davis, who's here from Somos, which is a telephony organization in the US, global numbering intelligence, get my wording right here. It's great to have telecom representation and insights via Justen, and he'll talk about a proposal to collaborate with the financial sector on a deep dive on telephony intel sharing. We will then ask Robert Harris from Feedzai to talk about federated learning as an approach for data sharing and to explore what we could bring to that conversation about this emerging technology and technique for doing intelligence sharing that's a bit different than the way it's been done traditionally. And then finally, we'll hear from our friends at Cifas, Simon Mueller and Mark Courtney. Mark didn't have the benefit of having his picture up here. We apologize in advance. And they will talk about their international fraud data standard concept. And that's going to be the bulk of our discussion today will be a deep dive into that IFDS because that's the most clearly defined project that we have right now. So the first two are just going to be 5 minutes of, hey, here's what we're thinking, here's some concepts, here's some ideas, and then we'll open it up to what do you think, feedback. So we'll do 10 minutes on each of the first two projects, and then transition to Simon and Mark at Cifas. And they would really like to do a deeper dive into their concept, and they have some specific questions that they'd like to ask the group, get input and feedback to help refine the concept. And then just protocol-wise, the way we're going to do this is I have my colleague Ruben is here. Right there, standing. He's going to have the microphone. If you have when you have a comment or a question, just raise your hand. Ruben will come to you and use the microphone so that we can all hear on the headphones because we can't hear if you don't use the microphone. All right. Thank you guys all for being here. Thanks for your interest in this really, really important topic. And with that, let me ask Justen to come on up and kick us off.
Thank you, Nils. So yeah, Justin Davis, Global Public Policy and Industry Relations with Somos. Somos is the North American numbering administrator, so we support the FCC with regards to the toll-free numbering database, the North American numbering plan database, all geographic numbers, as well as the reassigned numbers database, which encapsulates everything from a disconnected number perspective. And then globally, our reach from a beyond number administration is numbering intelligence. And so with that, we extend it to 220 countries globally, where we look at things from a numbering intelligence perspective, the use associated with numbers, so on and so forth. And we work with 11,000 telecom providers within the U.S. and globally. And a lot of what we're looking at when we talk about the workshop and the focuses around bringing in telecom, what it means, so on and so forth, is, as you can see here, the three primary objectives around it. Certainly looking at things around the existing capabilities, whether those are infrastructure or current initiatives that are underway. Understanding those better from a global perspective to then understand what and should be shared from that standpoint. Beyond that is looking at some of the specific examples, defining some of those examples. What is the outcome? What's the success stories? There's a lot of success stories, whether that's around what telecoms are doing themselves, whether it's capabilities by third parties like us, Somos, whether it is regulations that are being implemented. There's a lot of success stories around some of the regulations that are happening. Some regulators are a lot more aggressive than others, and so certainly there is there's some learnings that are already of tactics that are already in place. And then next is certainly exploring recommendations to take it to the next level. What can we additionally do now, and then what's coming down the pike in the future? So certainly when we look at things from a numbering perspective, within the telecom industry, everything starts with a number. Impersonation is one of the biggest things that we definitely see within the U.S. We've had some great conversations with Joe Devers of Bank of America, so on and so forth, and that impersonation certainly of a bank, or a financial institution, but impersonation doesn't stop there. A lot of what we see in the U.S. is also around utilities, impersonation of utility companies, impersonation of the Postal Service, many types of impersonation that either start with a message, an SMS, or start with a phone call. And from that impersonation standpoint, the use of telephone numbers in a lot of cases could be, there's different terms. Some of it could be throwaway numbers or something of that nature. And it's not just looking at it from the threat actor perspective. We also look at it, and we work with government officials looking at things with regards to who are the bad actors that are enabling a lot of this, right? A lot of telecom providers that we have, globally, the problem we run into as a telephone number administrator is we will administer ranges of numbers specifically to a provider, and then the biggest problem that we have is suballocation, and it gets so far down the chain that the original range may be tied to the original carrier it was administered to. The services associated with it could be 5 to 10 providers down from that original provider with regards to who they're giving numbers to. So it's not just looking at the threat actors, it's looking at the categorizing the enablers as well. When we think about the impersonation aspect of things, a lot of what we're seeing is, again, back to that throwaway number. One of the biggest consumers of telephone numbers right now is around IoT. IoT is a data-only connection. However, from a cellular-based standpoint, it needs a telephone number to be able to register to that ecosystem. So it's activating a huge amount of numbers. Within the U.S., there's about 300 million telephone numbers that are being used just purely for data-only services. But what it does is it enables the ability to use that active number and take that and use it to initiate fraudulent calls or fraudulent texts. That's not a number that we can actually turn down. However, based on that, we have the ability to identify those particular numbers that are being used for IoT-based services. They will remain active, and then from there, we have the ability to be able to take those and disallow the ability to generate some sort of a fraudulent traffic. So when we look at things certainly from an example perspective, that's certainly one example that we can look at as it relates to that. Am I at time?
Yeah.
That was quick. So anyhow.
No, this is great. But what I would add is, there we go. Great. And what I would add is our observation when we proposed this idea, and it was proposed by our colleague at Bank of America, the observation is that there are not a lot of opportunities for experts within the financial institution world that work on this challenge. That it's particularly concerned with brand impersonation via phone calls, right? So scammers using these discarded numbers and other sources of numbers to build out their misidentified calling and impersonation. But what we observed was that there aren't a lot of spaces for the telecom sector experts that work on this and the financial institution world sector experts that work on this to come together and actually do a deep dive and exploration and understand each other and understand the context that we're working with. I think one of the challenges that we face regularly in our work as GASA, and one of the reasons I think that we exist, is because it's always easy to point fingers and blame other sectors for not doing enough or for being negligent somehow. And what we want to do is enable the space for the people who are committed to this to come together to better understand what's already being done, how, why, and where the opportunities then lie to collaborate and find joint solutions. So this is the point here is to do something quite specific on telephony and financial institution intel sharing and to produce clear learning from that then could be applied to a number of different contexts and a number of different platforms. So with that, let me pause there and open it up. If anyone has any feedback, ideas, or observations, happy to just take a couple questions or comments quickly. Ruben's running.
So in Australia and various other places, we've seen sender ID registries established to kind of crack down on alpha code or short sender ID abuse. Is that something you see as valuable, and where is the US in that space?
No, certainly from a sender ID perspective, there is definitely definitely a need and a use for that. When we think about it with regards to what the U.S. has done, initially it was the traditional 10-digit telephone number, then there was the initiation of short codes, and then 10-digit DLC, so on and so forth. As we transition more into RCS, right, from an RCS perspective, the ability to have a sender ID specifically focused on RBM, RCS business messaging, right, again, allows that validation and verification and truly identify or associate it back to the initial brand that's tied to it. So yes, the U.S. is certainly doing things from a sender ID perspective, and I know there are several other countries that are investigating that as well.
Any other questions, comments, insights, brilliant points?
Tough crowd. Tough crowd.
I recognize, by the way, also we're up. We co-timed this with the telecoms breakout group,
So
which
all
is
the telecom
unfortunate
questions over
scheduling.
there.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
So. Okay. Well. Simon.
So, quick question. I think the answer is probably there in your first paragraph, but this is about OTT providers and WhatsApp in particular, where the experience in the UK is increasingly that brands are being impersonated, their customer services, others are being impersonated on WhatsApp, but because it's encrypted, it's difficult to spot, it's difficult to see, it relies on consumer intervention. What role WhatsApp and similar providers in finding and identifying solutions here?
And that would definitely be the cross-sector portion of this, right? So when we think about it from that perspective, when we look at the telecom side of things that relates to a number, one is that number, or should that number be used to establish the account, period, right? And then Two, certainly from a WhatsApp standpoint, we actually had a great conversation a little bit earlier today around that, is that's where that cross-sharing or cross-collaboration tied to this, we can provide the numbering intelligence associated with it. So should an account be established utilizing that number? Once the account is established, right, that's where we would pull more information with regards to WhatsApp specifically, to be able to then, again, is it legitimate? Is it tied to a brand? Did it originate from that brand based on what they have associated numbering-wise with that brand? And is the number in any way, shape, or form reputation-wise? Should it be gray listed? Should it be blacklisted? And therefore, it should be blocked with regards to WhatsApp itself.
Great. One more over here. And please feel free to identify yourselves and your affiliation.
Of course, yeah. So it's Paul Morris from Vonage. Not all the telco people are in the other
Noted.
session.
Noted.
So, yeah, noted. Justin, with your global perspective across this, so we discussed, my colleague here, Australia, we're doing a great job with registry there and anti-scams. Singapore also doing a great job, I think personally. If we were to, where do we best apply ourselves? Where is the best bang for our buck in terms of effort globally? So the US are doing things are happening elsewhere, UK, but if we were to focus on a territory, because I think this only works when you get a caucus of carriers and regulators and government working together, to generate the momentum for this. Where do you think is the best opportunity if we were to focus?
The ability to share from a national level, the ability to share numbering information more broadly as opposed to just within the confines of that particular country, right? So a lot of that starts with, hey, I've got a lot of numbers, U.S. numbers, because on average we see 60 to 80% of fraud comes from without, not from within any given country, right? So we see a lot of U.S. numbers certainly that originate from outside, right? From those particular countries and those providers within those countries, the ability to share that numbering specific detail to say that none of these U.S. numbers should not be originating from anywhere else coming back into it, right? That is certainly one thing. The other thing is the ability to do trace forward, right? So we do trace back, right? But the ability to do trace forward to say that, wait a minute, I need to do more inspection on where that number is destined, where that number is going, so on and so forth. So then network operators have the ability to make decisions before anything originates. A lot of time it's traced back. A lot of time it's after the event. That's where it becomes really, really challenging because it's already gone through the network.
All right. In the interest of time, I'm going to cut us off there on this one. But if you're interested in thinking more, in learning more, and engaging on this particular topic, come find Justen or myself afterwards, and we're happy to continue the conversation, but also sign you up and involve you in the work moving forward. One takeaway I certainly have from this very brief conversation is the utility of involving the OTT services in the conversation as well. So that's
And I
bringing
think the
in
only
tech
thing to
into
add to
this.
that would be from an impersonation standpoint, definitely the banking and the financial institutions.
Absolutely.
But that impersonation could start with utilities and end up in banking, right, with
Right.
regards to transactions. So,
Right.
yep, leave it there.
Okay. We'll leave it there. Thank you. And with that, let me ask. Thanks, Justen. And let me ask Robert to come up and take us into the next project proposal.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. And I realize that very often timing is everything. And I'm very conscious not only is there a telco track on now, but there's also a financial services track. So in case you don't know Feedzai provides AI technology to help banks stop fraud and financial crime. We do it for banks, we do it for payment providers, and increasingly networks. So, move to the next slide. So what I'm just briefly here to call out, really, I know it's like a second day of a long conference. You're probably all very swamped. But just to flag up, the action where we think we can deliver the most value and the most beneficial results to consumers and financial institutions today. So if you're interested, obviously reach out to the working group and get involved. So where we're focused, to be very clear, is we're not sharing data. We're all about sharing intelligence. We're also looking at where can that intelligence have the most impact. And for us, although there's a lot of intelligence shared after the event as part of the investigation, part of the follow-up, part of tracking the criminal, for us, it's all about prevention being better than cure. So for us, where we're focused as part of this working group is very much in the intelligence sharing, real-time interaction, sub-second reaction, response, to be able to allow institutions to prevent the crimes happening in the first place. Okay, so that's very clearly where we sit. It needs sub-second response times. You know, and we've also got to look at where the current state of play is. So you could say traditional fraud prevention, according to Gartner, about 30% of banks and payment providers still sit within what they would call the traditional landscape of having primarily rules-based systems. If you want to be able to utilize the one advantage that financial institutions have, which is data, you need to be able to analyze that data using AI. So, you know, we have to move on. The second premise that we propose as part of this committee is being able to exclude PII data. We know regulation has a lot of controls around PII, and probably quite rightly. We think we don't have time. We need to act now. We cannot wait for regulation, not just across Europe, but of course on a global basis, because we operate globally. We think any initiative needs to be operational globally. So for us, that means don't consider PII. So for us, federated learning, if you're sharing the intelligence and not the data, you don't need to worry about the regulations that impact that area. Very, very key. It means we can act now. So what we're proposing with federated learning is you don't move the data. Every bank, every institution keeps the data within their own environments, but you move the AI. It works globally. And as a starting point, it's not perfect, but as a starting point to give some real meaningful results, you only need to share a limited subset of that intelligence. So based around some core indicators, pretty much what banks already share today when they make a payment. So it's very narrow, but it's very broad. Going across that community, you're able to see, using federated learning, an institution can see things that they cannot see by themselves. So that's really the approach here. So it's collaboration at the intelligence level. And what's more, we want to start acting now. So this is as far as we've gone. We want to expand this working group through GASA to look at how it can develop herd immunity now using the current rules. We know what the criteria are. We speak to the institutions. We know pretty much, but happy to get other input. You know, how much value is being detected? You know, there's been a lot of focus on high-value scams, and what are we seeing as a result? You're probably very familiar in the room. But it's no longer necessarily the high value. It's much higher volume, but low-value scams. So how can the models adapt? How can the federated learning approach adapt quickly and get used to those new scenarios? And equally importantly is the deployment agility. So has the institution got the ability to take in the new detection methods? So in terms of what we want to assess and work with other partners is to understand, you know, some of the things that could actually be blockers to some of these initiatives. So the technical feasibility, we know that a lot of people, a lot of banks are investigating this now, looking at federated learning. It's a very, very promising way to tackle scams and fraud today. But what's the legal feasibility? Making sure that if there's additional data, additional intelligence that can be shared, what are the impacts on a global basis in terms of, you know, compliance with regulation? And last but not least, the operational feasibility. So those are sort of dimensions I think that, you know, we would welcome input on. I think the working group could definitely benefit from. And then just to finish, this is where we start to overlap with some of the other initiatives as part of the working group. So some of the things that would need to be considered with this is how can we be interoperable between different machine learning capabilities? So Feedzai, as ourselves, we've already developed this. We developed it 2 years ago. It's live in production. We've proven the value of federated learning. It's not just us. Other banks have done it as well. We're not a bank, but you know what I mean. And then, as of yesterday, we announced that this is now available to any institution. Don't have to be a Feedzai customer. A simple API, connect. You get the results of a risk score based on 5 or 6 of the best performing AI models out there, and you can score your transaction. So we know it's available, but where we need to develop this further is then how do we expand this out so that the source models, the people feeding into this federated learning, can come from any platform. So we need to look at the taxonomy, come up with a standard taxonomy. So we know some of the other initiatives around that. And then we also need to put in some baseline using synthetic data to create, ultimately what we're looking to achieve is the model sharing infrastructure. So being able to address both the local boundaries, being able to operate across multiple clouds, and also being able to look at the different data residency issues. So we're starting that journey. We think if you look around and see the initiatives around intelligence sharing and what the benefits are, there's lots of papers out there. We want to bring that information together, but we want to share different views and get people's insights on what's happening in this space. Because as we all know, no single organization is going to solve this on their own. Hence, we need input. But we think it's a really promising way to go. Let's prevent fraud before it happens, and let's be able to enable the sharing of intelligence now rather than waiting for regulation to catch up. So if you're interested, please reach out to Nils, for myself, and let's get this working group going. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Robert. And if there's any way to scare off people from joining a working group, it's saying we're going to develop a common fraud taxonomy. But anyhow, there it is. No, thank you, Robert. So maybe just time for one comment or thought, if someone has one, because I want to make sure we have enough time to get into the Cifas workshop. But very relevant, timely topic that we would really love to get the wisdom of the community involved to flesh this out further and deeper.
Taxonomy. How close is it to the Euro Banking Association taxonomy version 7? You've already developed this?
No, taxonomy, no, because until now we've just been working with our own customers, but we see the value of this much more being able to go across the whole community, not just obviously the customers that we have. So no, we haven't started work on the taxonomy, but maybe we're seeing initiatives in part of the same working group or elsewhere that can help. We know that there are different taxonomies. It's not necessarily the European banking one. There are other taxonomies, and that's the challenge of being a global, trying to look for a global solution, right?
All right. Unless there's any other burning thoughts or questions, please come find us afterwards. We're going to have a coffee break after this, and we'll stick around and happy to discuss further on any of these topics. So with that, let me ask Mark Courtney to come up here and Simon from Cifas. You can just get Simon.
It's okay. We can have Simon.
I'll kick off. Right, so we're going to talk about data sharing. That comes as a surprise to everyone here because all we do at these events is talk about data sharing. I'm a big fan of James Carville, the political theorist and advisor to Bill Clinton, who said it's the economy stupid. We can say that about data sharing. We know it is the solution to solving the fraud issue. But this is my 6th GASA. And at every GASA, we have spoken in depth about data sharing. Once you add in the huge industry of other conventions, conferences, industry events where we talk about data sharing, it tells you how important it is. We recognize that it's of fundamental importance, and yet, bar in some very narrow lanes, and particularly within certain jurisdictions, and I think in the UK we're very proud that we are one of them. I see Jade in front of me, so Australia is also another jurisdiction where data sharing has really started to make progress. We're not doing enough. We are not doing it fast enough, and we are hampered by a fragmented global framework of 195 different jurisdictions. Once you overlay then sectoral interpretations and individual business interpretations to that, we are talking about a multiplicity of different understandings of what is permissible that holds us all back. I was really struck yesterday listening to an intervention by Emily Taylor from the GSE, who said, at the current rate of progress, it will take 350 years for us to globally, or at least across enough nations, to have a data sharing framework that works for us all on the basis that we need it to work, which is one, cross-sectoral. We need to look beyond our sectors, but critically international, and even more important, that one that is focused on messy, grey, preventative data. We need a step change, and Mark's going to talk to this step change in a moment, but if we don't acknowledge that we need a step change, if we don't make the leap that says the current framework simply doesn't work, let's stop tinkering, let us as a coalition of the willing do something different, we are not going to make the change. And the only people who benefit are the criminals. And that should shame us all. So ahead of Mark talking to the detail of IFDS, the International Fraud Data Standard, which we are so pleased to have brought forward in conjunction with our partners at GASA and others, including the UN, we will not be succeeding. We will not make the difference we all need to see. So please do join with us on this. I'm going to hand over to Mark at this point for the detail on it and all of the thinking that underpins it. But it is data sharing, stupid, and it will work.
Thank you, Simon. I'm going to take these headphones off, and hopefully you can still hear me without having the headphones on, because it's the most weird thing hearing your own voice. So this started from, as Simon said, Mark Courtney, sorry, I didn't get my picture up. So it's Mark Courtney, Deputy CEO and Chief Product Officer at Cifas. So after spending the last 25 years in fraud and identity building solutions around that, one of the things that was striking me, I think it was while we were in Washington in the last GASA, was tech has never been the problem. We have the technology to share data, to move data, to encrypt data and everything like that. It's always been the conversations when we got our lawyers involved or the legal teams involved to do that, to say, right, we need an agreement between these organisations. So what we're trying to do here really is about creating legal confidence and clarity to do this. So, you know, it started from a very simple idea that we talked about, was standard contractual clauses between organisations to share data for fraud and financial crime. So if we start with that basis and then it builds out from there. So I'm going to spend 5 minutes and then Simon's going to back up on the discussion and hopefully try and do discussion with headphones on, which is going to be interesting. So let me try and click on. So we know today, and I'm repeating a lot of what's been said over the last few days, but fraud today is industrial and it's borderless. Cross-sector crime, it crosses multiple channels. What starts on one channel moves to a different channel, moves to another channel, moves around. And unfortunately at the moment, data sharing, if it happens at all, is always after the event. It's about, well, how do we reimburse? How do we go back after the money? So what we need to do is create a framework that allows us to move much further and earlier on the kill chain, so we can share signals, whether someone's at risk, whether an account has been advertised from receiving funds from Mueller, etc. And we need to be able to do that across border. Our proposal, therefore, is create what we're calling the IFDS, the International Fraud Data Standard. So this is about a unified and lawful framework that gives us global trust and confidence to share data to prevent fraud and financial crime. So ensuring we do that in the right way. Safe harbour for those organisations to do that, to protect peoples and organisations, while still maintaining high standards of privacy and human rights, and often that's very important and written to all our existing laws. We need to do that. We think there's 4 layers within this that need to be designed out as the working group and wider to do that. Firstly, governance. We think it needs a steward. I'm not saying, and we're not saying we think Cifas should be that steward, but we think there needs to be a steward in place that can ensure those standards are maintained, oversee the framework, update the framework as we go, certify the participants, and design the framework and maintain the framework. That doesn't mean they will process data. So think of it like a standard and make sure that everyone's playing the parts. And if someone misbehaves, they're out of the scheme and they can't be involved in that process. So we need someone to do that. Then we have the standards layer, which is the backbone of it. That's the common legal and operational standards that how data will move across borders. So very clear rules on the purpose, minimisation, retention, security and accountability about what you can do within that standard. Then the operations layer. So how does it work? What can you actually do? So shared language. We do need shared taxonomies, and whether that's EBA and others, we need to bring that together in some way. It's a big piece of work to do that. But unless we do that, people won't understand. When we send a signal from one country to another, we need to get common standards on language. And it's about so people know what they can share, when they can share it, and why they're sharing it. So people can receive that signal. So I think very simply, you receive a signal, you understand when you can keep it, what you can use it for. Can I use that to disrupt an advert? Can I use that to protect an individual? Can I use that to stop money moving? So people are clear on what's going on with the data when it's sent. And then lastly, the technical layer. So what we're not talking about here is a single tech, a single provider, a single solution, more about interoperability. So how do you structure a signal? What information is there? But a lot of flexibility about what data can be shared within that. So an array of information, but labelled in the right ways. We talk in the UK about national intelligence model, so you can actually say what's the confidence of the source it came from, what can you do with it, where can you take it, how long can you use it. So we think that's really important. Core principles, prevention of speed. I was talking this morning around this, so apologies if you heard me say this before. We need a system that can share fraud data and intelligence at the same speed that we allow money to move around the world at the moment. So that's going to be really important. Data has to be moved quickly. Minimization, obviously absolutely essential for data protection, human rights, all that. We only share in what is the data that will cause that. If we're not, then we need to relook at it and change that. Decentralize the data. We're not talking about creating a huge centralized database of information. There'll be places where we want to bring data together, like federated learning, so where you want to match against something and do that. But a lot of this will be about sending in a single piece of information, a URL where an advert's held, a phone number that's been involved in fraud, or bits of information we need to do that need to reach somewhere to prevent fraud from moving forward. Centralized accountability, we talked about the steward, we think that's really important. And obviously, signals need to be time-bound. We can't have data sitting around forever. How long can you keep that? How long before you need to delete it, etc. Certification, I've touched on it. I won't go too far into that, but I think the key bits in there really for me are like revocable. If you don't meet the standard, you can't be in the network as such. And it needs to be asked, an access gateway to do that, certification to do it as well. Talked a lot about this. Safe harbour, I think standard contractual clause is the biggest challenge often. I'm sure there's lawyers in the room, but we'll give a contract to a legal team, they'll send it back, it'll look totally different, that says the same thing in different words. We need standard contractual clauses that everyone's aligned with, which I think is really important. Protection accountability is going to be really important. It's about good faith fraud prevention. It's strictly limited purposes for fraud and financial crime to do this. In terms of participants, how do we see that operating? So we've got the fully certified, as you'd expect. We want banks, PSPs, telcos, platforms, crypto providers, and national schemes coming in with comprehensive roles, facilitating distribution of signals. We'd have to acknowledge the role of trusted flaggers. That could be like the scam baiting organisations that we see today that will see a bank account that a scammer has given out. We need to be able to get that signal to the right country and the right bank. As well as public authorities, we need law enforcement. We talked about public-private partnerships. In the UK, a lot of our data goes into the public sector. We need more data coming back the other way into the private sector, so we can take those signals and pass those out to the right people and stop fraud in its tracks as we move through. It's really important to do. So, summary. Obviously, we've got the different layers, but I think we're talking about it's an interoperability standard. People understand it, they understand the language, and their systems know how to take that data in, and they know how to create signals, and we think that's really important. We move it in real time like we move money, and we create a lawful safe harbour, and people feel confident to do this for this purpose, and it's limited. So we can't do that on our own. We think it's really important. We need a working group, and we need multiple organisations from the UN and FATF and everyone, as they have been very supportive of this, to help us take this forward. My call is for you to get involved, but I will pass you over to Simon now to lead a discussion.
So I'm going to try to lead a discussion, and Nils, I may need your help with this as well. So we have a plan. The plan is to have this fully worked up as a proposal, a detailed proposal, backed by industry, backed by all parts of industry, that we can hand over to one of several august bodies at the end of this year. That could be, and will be, to a certain extent, the UN ODC. It will be FATF, as the UK takes on the presidency of the Financial Action Task Force later this year. It might well be the G7 and the G20 as well. These all feel like bodies who could take this initiative forward, who have shown genuine interest in this. But to be able to do that, and be able to do that credibly, we need, A, the support of industry, of relevant sectors to say, this is a proposal that can work, that could make the difference. But critically, where Mark identified those 4 layers around operations, around governance, around transparency, around technology, that the elements that sit within them are the right ones. So that when the UN, when G7 go out to talk to people, when they go out to consult on this, when they seek to implement and execute this, they are doing so with the full support of industry, knowing that what they are taking forward is considered, deals with all the relevant issues, and can then move forward at pace. So, he says, going to the clicker, we have some questions. So, one, do we think this is worthwhile, and what are the biggest barriers to adopting the IFDS in your sector? And then a question in relation to each of those layers, the governance layer, the standards layer, the operational layer, and the technical layer. But I think in the interest of time, and Nils, I don't know if you want to say anything about the working group process, we will just throw this open to questions and comments and do our best between the 3 of us to respond to those.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think that this is an ambitious proposal, but it's exactly the kind of thing that we want to use the working groups for, to get input and wisdom from the crowds and from the cross-sectoral community that we're building. So, yeah, I mean, Simon, I think it just start off with probably just getting general feedback and reactions to the proposal, and then dive into the specifics as time permits.
So it'd be good to know if anyone does have any instant feedback on this.
Lawrence White, Institute of International Finance. So just to point you to the work the Financial Stability Board has done on the governance of the UTI and UPI in the OTC derivatives space, that they're 2 data standards that were developed by the CPMI, and the FSB worked on the governance. Took 2 or 3 years to set up, but basically handed the governance to the Regulatory Oversight Committee, which is co-chaired by the ECB and a US regulator. That's one example. And CPMI, the Committee on Payments and Market Infrastructures, has done a lot of work around standardization of ISO 20022 messages, and also of OTC derivatives data messages. And so both of those entities have some expertise in this kind of work in association with ISO TC68.
Fantastic, that's hugely useful. I mean, it goes without saying that with this, we want to build on what exists already wherever possible. So I think when we talk about data sharing, we always say to the UK government, to other organisations, use existing rails wherever possible. And the same applies, let's build on what already exists, but let's make it relevant and fit for purpose for this wider ambition. There was, I think, a hand up, just, was it you, sir? No. See if any other questions, and if no questions, we may pick on relevant people, and the National Australian Anti-Scam Centre may be looking at you for a contribution. But in all seriousness, Jay, do you think that this is the sort of thing that can make a meaningful difference to the work of your organisation and parties involved with it?
It is hard to talk when you've got your headphones on, isn't it? I'll do one ear. Yes, I mean, I think this is one of the challenges I think we all have. There's a lot of different languages people are speaking. I think work around taxonomies, there's been a lot of talk about. I was actually going to ask a question which was around, my understanding was the OECD was having a look at some issues around sort of classification and things like that as well. So it sounds like to me, given what was just spoken about too with different standards, there's a piece to bring together what's already happening and then look, okay, now where's the gap, or what can we leverage from this? But these sorts of frameworks are needed, and I think when we've talked, or I've talked earlier about how we've been doing things nationally, we're looking to share things internationally. In order to do that, it has become apparent that there does need to be some kind of frameworks in place to enable that. And I think these sort of initiatives are worthwhile and worth exploring with all the challenges that come with it. Don't have the answers on the governance layer, but that is a really important piece, though, to get the trust of everybody that might be working on it. So, yes, valuable. But I would look carefully at what's already being done and then see where the gap is and work there.
And I think that's exactly the ambition. It's to have big, bold ambition, but it's to start relatively small, start with a coalition of the willing, start with, is it opt-in, start with those who will help most enable its success, rather than try and reinvent the wheel or boil the ocean. Mark, I don't know if you have a...
Yeah, I totally agree. I think we know this is going to be really hard, but hard things are worth trying, aren't they? And I think that's really important. I look at similar examples, not in the fraud and financial crime, like the one NDA program, which has been really successful for standardising NDAs between organisations. So I think talking to organisations have been involved in that process as well, and how they went through it and got lawyers involved can be really key. But totally, I think on the standards point, yeah, then we're the EBA ones. There's other taxonomies in the UK. There's no doubt loads of those globally, and we need to find a common way of talking, definitely.
Great. So we hear OECD, we hear FSB, Financial Stability Board, CPMI. We know FATF, of course, is looking at aspects of this as well. So there's a logical connection point there. I guess, Simon, do you want to see if there's any questions about any of the layers?
Well, if there are any questions on the layers, we'd be really keen to have. Well, I think the first question is, are we agreed as a group that these are the right layers? Is there something missing from this without delving into too granular level of detail? But are these the right headlines? And I'm assuming by the nodding in the audience, and I'm always happy to take silence as consent, that is the case. But I think whilst people think, Nils, there's a question for you that, if I may throw it to you, is to why GASA's interest. This has to be something that works for GASA, works for GASA's members, and works in delivering on GASA's mission.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're excited about this. We think it fits perfectly into what we're trying to get at with the working groups, and just to be, I want to emphasize the point that this is the working groups that we're creating are convening and creating the space for all of you, for all of the experts and the innovators and the thinkings and the folks who are doing the frontline thinking in this space, to be able to push those ideas forward, and we try to get some solutions out there. So this is not meant to be driven necessarily by us, though we will of course engage and participate. So I think the plan will be to carry this work forward via these projects and the small groups, and I think the proof will be in the pudding in terms of, can we get engagement and people that have the bandwidth and the will to spend some time on this and roll up your sleeves and participate in some pace of engagement to carry the work forward. But of course, in order to do that, we need leaders, and so we have leaders here, which we're grateful for. And so I think part of what we're trying to spark here today with these presentations and these ideas is to generate interest, to generate engagement, and that is the hope. Is that you walk away from here, and we'll continue to share at every opportunity we have, and to engage the conversation, and encourage participation and progress. So, by all means.
Fantastic. I think it's worth saying as well, so we know that we are positing a simple idea to an incredibly complicated problem. We know that actually the reality of an international fraud data standard is going to be complicated, it's going to be involved, it's going to be a really long, hard slog, but it's going to be a much easier journey than 350 years of negotiating data sharing agreements between countless individual firms in countless different jurisdictions, where issues of trust come to the fore, issues of lack of knowledge, issues of conflicting experience elsewhere, all help undermine a process that, I say it's a process, that help undermine processes, because there is no central process that people can have faith in. What we've done is present 10 slides or so that set out our high-level thinking. Underpinning all of this is an extraordinary canonical piece of work that Mark has been working on over the past month. So if anyone has any questions around the detail, do find Mark, talk to Mark, pick his brain on how it might work, because we know it's not what we've just presented, but what we are presenting is an idea, a lodestar, and a light that demonstrates a way forward. I don't know, Mark, do you have a...
Not really. Not much to add on that, Simon. I think, I agree with the 350 years. I know it sounds dramatic, but I think we've been involved. I'm very fortunate in the UK that we have the Cifas and other organisations that can share data, clear reasons in law why we can do that, and we have processes and everything in place. It is not the same in other countries. We've been working on another territory just over the sea from us, and that's been 10 years from when they wanted to start the process to legislation nearly passing now that allows them to do it. So I think I'm very conscious that, like you say, if we carry on that route, then we're all going to still be talking about we need to do more data sharing. So for me, it's probably as much for me. My peace of mind is to try and make it much easier just to get the lawyers to agree to do things. And so I'm really keen for more people to get involved. I'd love to share a 55-page document with those people when they get involved, and they can have a really good read and enjoy that if they get interested in these things like me. But yeah, I'm just excited to hopefully take it forward again.
So I do have a question from the Zoom call, from the Zoom feed. Ken Palla, our friend from California, banking expert in this space, asks, what type of encryption do you plan for?
Oh, well, that's a question. I'm going to palm that one off to you, Mark, as a product and technologist. So,
we haven't set in stone the encryption standards. I think we've used the term quantum proof in what we need to do, but we haven't set any of those, and that's part of the technical layer we want everyone to design with. Obviously, it's got to be very strong. This is not about sharing mass data in big databases of file. It's single signals at scale. So, yeah, more than happy for Ken to be involved and help us in that process. It'd be fantastic.
and I think worth saying as well, so the idea behind this is that you provide a framework, you provide an accountability framework for myriad different networks to be able to be brought together. Because we recognise in creating something global that you're potentially creating a behemoth, a monster, but it's much better that what you have is a whole host of regional, localized solutions that build into this and interface with it and then enable that transmission of data where it's needed from one corner of the globe to another corner of the globe for fraud prevention purposes.
Great. All right, so we have 5 minutes left before the break, and I would just open it up to the group for any input and feedback to whether there's additional questions on this, any of the previous proposals, or anything about the working group in general, or the work of the working group, or anything that you would like to propose or contribute to the mission that we're laying out here. And you know, what I will and would leave you with is definitely a call to action. You know, we exist to get things done. We are conscious that the convening that we do is necessary but not sufficient to solving the problem. So the convening is great. We love to see all of you. We love that you're all here, but we want you to really engage, get involved, and help build the solutions that we need. So let me just pause there and see what else, other thoughts that may be generated. Yeah, please.
Hi, I'm Alexander van der Walbaak of TNO, Independent Research Organization of the Netherlands. Fond of data sharing initiatives. Also think they're very difficult to do, especially because usually data which being shared is dynamic. So if you create an ontology, it probably will be obsolete in the moment you start sharing the data. So I was wondering how you think about creating a systemic that can deal with more dynamic data. And one of my hobby horses is digital identity. I'm sure digital identity will introduce a whole new set of signals that needs to be shared.
Absolutely, and it's something we thought very carefully about when we were looking at this. So if you think about the signal itself, there's several common fields that you want. What's it for? How can you use it? What's the confidence in the data? When we're actually talking about the data that's shared, we're talking about very flexible. We've kept it really flexible. It's an array of, and we're not specifying those fields and what the limits of them is. So that can change over time. So we always talk about Cifas and no wasted integration. We want this principle of a very flexible system that array to start with might be, someone might send a name and address. The next, it might just be a phone number next time. But yeah, absolutely. There's fields that we don't even know about today that we'll need to send in the future. So we've tried to keep that deliberately flexible in the design as it stands. Yeah.
Thank you. One more question from the chat from Ronald Goose. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong. Apologize, Ronald. Although the challenge is the financial scamming of persons, businesses, and institutions, the legal online selling of drugs as well as other products is a common gateway to financial scams. Is there a role for the gateway regulators to become part of the preventative activities? Could the IFDS benefit from engaging these gateways?
Short answer, yes. We need those signals because I think we've heard multiple times over the last 2 days is that, you know, the fact that scams are happening, those gangs are also involved in other activities and that. So I think that the same signals be of value for multiple areas around fraud and financial crime. Yeah.
Great, thanks. All right, 2 minutes left. Final call for input, questions, comments, jokes. I'll do these three.
Sophie from Cifas. I think just a reflection on this is that the reason why this is so important is for people like me who work in product innovation, that we'll get to move faster, we'll get to do more, find more interesting ways to be able to fight the fraudsters and stop the harm from happening. And as long as we bake in that flexibility that you need in order to be able to continue to grow and try and get ahead of the problem, then I think this is going to be, well, I believe it's going to be the only way that we're actually going to be able to start sharing internationally with different organisations, different sectors, different platforms that you never even think of yet. So, sorry, just a reflection.
Test.
I guess we obviously already have the Global Signals Exchange. So, what's the USP of this versus existing infrastructures?
So we speak all the time with GSE, and partly this has been designed with the GSE in mind, built on their experience and our experience of engaging with them and how we are able to share signals with them. So GSE, what a fantastic thing. It is a lane within all of the data sharing structures that exist globally. They have had great success, but dealing with 4 large tech companies and a small number of other organizations. For the GSE to really benefit and deliver on its potential, it needs hundreds, literally hundreds of data sharing agreements now to be agreed with organizations across the globe, be they banks, be they telecoms companies, be they regulators, as just been mentioned, be they other public authorities. And that's why at that point, this is where these things become complementary.
Yeah, and that's absolutely, Emily and Lucian are very supportive of this because they've got the same, they've spent hours and hours and hours and hours on legal agreements around this. So that's why we're saying about it's a technical interoperability. We're not saying one platform, GSE absolutely can benefit from this as well. And that's the difference. It's a legal and operational standard versus a technical solution.
And I just had a final question. I was really interested in particularly those legal challenges. We've been sort of negotiating and setting up data sharing agreements at the National Anti-Scam Centre, and I think there's real value in looking to create, where we can, standardised, as particularly around contracts. That can be really helpful. To what extent is the work, or do you propose the work would be informed by the experience of a lot of organisations that have been in this space? Because there's really different issues that come up. So, for example, when we work with sharing, say, one regulator in Australia with another regulator overseas versus a regulator in Australia with the private sector overseas versus within a country, etc. And so they're all very, very different scenarios. And I wondered whether you'd benefit from perhaps hearing a bit more, or organisations sharing some of the challenging parts. Because sometimes I find with the legal agreements, a lot of it is easy, and then there's a couple of clauses that take the 12 months to work through. And so having examples of that and working through them in those particular sort of use cases would be really interesting to make sure you kind of get these right so they can be used by a range of stakeholders. That would be a suggestion.
We would love that, absolutely. I think at the moment as it stands, it's built on our frustrations over the years and other conversations, but that's absolutely, well, we want the working group to be involved with really bringing all that information together.
This is about bringing best practice together, isn't it? And that's about where success has happened and how we build on that and grow from that.
So it sounds like we have a couple great new members of the working group that have joined us. Thank you, Joy, Jade, and Lawrence. We welcome you guys to the team. No, and you please do continue to help us shape this. Please do continue to engage. You know, those of you who've thought a lot about this, we welcome your participation and your engagement. All right, we are at time. So I want to say a huge thank you to Simon, to Mark, to Robert, to Justen. Thank you guys so much. This is the first open meeting of our working groups that we've done here at Lisbon. This is our first time doing these in this way. Give us your feedback. Let us know what works, what you liked, and perhaps how we can improve. But most importantly, I do really want to go back to their previous slide, which is get involved. Come be part of the solution. And thanks for all of your attention. Enjoy the rest of the day. And that's it. Thanks.